In the middle of Europe, practically at the geographic center of the continent, on the northernmost point of the Danube, lies the beautiful city of Regensburg. With its 150,000 inhabitants, modern-day Regensburg is the fourth largest city in Bavaria. The region has developed over the last few decades into an important meeting point of trade and tourism. More than 20,000 students are enrolled here at the university and in other institutions of higher learning. Regensburg is also a fascinating city. It is both old and young. Old because of its world-famous historical substance, and young because of its legendary, almost Mediterranean way of life and its many students. It all began in 179 AD, when, under the rule of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the legion camp Castra Regina was constructed. The monumental stone camp gate inscription, still largely intact today, is regarded as the city's founding document. Sometime in the middle of the 6th century, the powerful Agilolfing dynasty chose Regensburg as its seat of power and made it the first capital of Bavaria. From the 10th to the 14th centuries, the town experienced its first era of prosperity, when active trade caused the economy to flourish. In 1245, Regensburg became a free imperial city, meaning that the town was allowed to govern itself and was subject only to the emperor. This prosperous period ended in the 15th century. Internal conflicts, struggles between Bavaria and Regensburg, and the shifting trade routes slowly diminished Regensburg's wealth, and its influence began to dwindle. With the establishment of the perpetual imperial diet in 1663, the city experienced a rebirth, bringing prosperity and pomp to the town. With the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire in 1806, and the annexation of Regensburg by Bavaria 4 years later, the town disappeared from the political map of Europe. The city seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. In the 19th and 20th centuries, industry settled primarily on the outskirts of the city, which fortunately allowed the historic core of Regensburg to survive the Second World War practically unscathed. Many refugees settled in this largely intact city. It wasn't until the 1960s, however, that the second rebirth of Regensburg began, when the Fourth Bavarian State University opened its doors to the public. In the 80s and 90s, important industrial companies like Siemens, BMW, and Toshiba built large factories in Regensburg. When walking through the old part of the city, one sees the history of Regensburg all around. The central starting point for such a tour is the Domplatz, or Cathedral Square. This is the Haus Hooiport. It is a classic example of a patrician's castle, built in the 13th century in Gothic style by Karl Kratzer, who was the Hansgraf, the city's chief official for trade. As such, he was the leader of the traveling merchants and held one of the most important positions in the town. Even today, in the splendid hall at the top of the great staircase, one can feast in practically royal style. Goliathstraße is dominated by patricians' houses. Here, the Goliath House, Goliath House estate, with its magnificent mural painting from the 16th century, strikes the visitor. It shows the fight between small, agile David and the giant Goliath, dressed in splendid armor. This palace was once the family seat of the Thundorfers. At the end of Goliathstraße, the Wattmarkt branches off to the left. At the very end stands the second highest patrician tower in Regensburg, the Baumburger Turm. It was erected in 1260 as a residential tower. The facade with its 7 stories rises 28 meters, or 92 feet above the ground. Whereas the splendid vaulted room in the ground floor hides behind a simple gate, the second story opens to the street as a loggia. The old city hall was built in several phases of construction from the 13th to the 18th centuries. The oldest part is the tall Rathausturm, or City Hall Tower. To the west is the adjoining Ratssaal, or Council Hall, with the torture chamber below. Next comes the Great Dance Hall, later called Imperial Hall during the Perpetual Imperial Diet. The Perpetual Imperial Diet made decisions at the green table, or put things off by shoving them aside onto the long bench. Both of these expressions are figures of speech in German today, and they originate in Regensburg. Today, the Old City Hall is the official residence of the Lord Mayor of the city. The exquisitely equipped elector's room is an extremely popular venue for civil wedding ceremonies. Not far from the Old City Hall is Wallenstrasse, formerly the Italian quarter of the city. Here, well-to-do patrician families in the High Middle Ages erected their castle-like residences. In the middle of the street is the Goldener Turm, the Golden Tower. At a height of 50 meters, that's 164 feet, it is the highest medieval towered house north of the Alps. Only a few steps away is Neupfarrplatz. The medieval Jewish quarter was destroyed in 1519, and the Jews were forced to leave the city. In place of the demolished synagogue, a church of Our Lady was built, which was converted into the first Protestant church in Regensburg in 1542. Showing the floor plan of the synagogue, a meeting place was established in 2005, designed by the well-known artist Danny Caravan. The sculpture, built into the ground and made of white concrete, invites the passerby to stop and relax. The Dokument Neupfarrplatz Museum contains cellars of the former Jewish quarter, excavated in the 1990s. The Residenzstraße leads from Neupfarrplatz to the cathedral. This is where Prince Karl Theodor von Dalberg, the sovereign of Regensburg from 1803 to 1810, lived. In addition, Napoleon set up quarters here after conquering the city in 1809. The most impressive medieval building in Regensburg is St. Peter's Cathedral. After a fire destroyed the Romanesque predecessor, leaving only the so-called Eselsturm, or Donkey's Tower, and parts of the side aisle, work on the present cathedral began in 1273, using the recently developed Gothic style imported from France. When construction was halted, nearly 250 years later, the towers were not yet finished. They would not receive their neo-Gothic spires until the 19th century on the initiative of King Ludwig I of Bavaria. The Cathedral Masons Guild was instituted in 1923 and continues to work to the present. Here, stones from the cathedral facade are preserved, restored, and replaced with much care and precision. To the north of the cathedral, there are still remnants of the Roman legion camp, built in 179 AD. The former north gate of the camp, the Porta Praetoria, with its flanking tower, was uncovered in 1887. This impressive construction of massive, yet carefully hewn blocks is evidence of the outstanding engineering skill and craftsmanship of the Roman builders. Not far from here, one finds the Alte Kornmarkt, or Old Grain Market, with the Alte Kapelle, or Old Chapel. It was built as a palace chapel by the Carolingians and is one of the oldest churches in Regensburg. The old chapel was given its present appearance in the 18th century, and its interior is aglow with the beauty of the Bavarian Rococo. One side of the old grain market is formed by Maximilianstraße. After Napoleon's troops destroyed the quarter in 1809, this completely new street was laid out. It soon developed into a splendid boulevard and remained the most popular place to take a stroll in the city well into the 20th century. Just off the street are the remains of the Roman Legion camp wall that was part of the city fortifications until 1809. The course of the Roman wall can also be seen in the neighboring Park Hotel Maximilian. This splendid building was built in 1889 in Neo-Rococo style. Directly across from the hotel is the family estate of the Princes of Thurn and Taxis. The family operated the postal service in Western Europe from the beginning of the 15th century onwards, and accumulated wealth and social prestige because of this. The family came to Regensburg, the seat of the Perpetual Imperial Diet, in 1748, when Prince Alexander Ferdinand von Thurn and Taxis was made Principal Commissioner, the representative of the Emperor at the Diet. They held this position until the end of the Old Empire in 1806. The present residence of the prince's family, St. Emmeram's Palace, was previously one of the oldest and most significant Benedictine monasteries in Bavaria. Founded at the beginning of the 8th century, it quickly became a center of spiritual, cultural, and scientific life. The process of secularization, which meant the dissolution of most monasteries at the end of the Holy Roman Empire, also led to a sudden closing of the abbey in 1810. In 1812, the Bavarian King Maximilian granted St. Emmeram to Prince Karl Alexander von Thurn and Taxis as compensation for having nationalized the postal service. The venerable monastery was to serve as the future residence of the members of this important noble dynasty. In the course of the 19th century, the medieval and Baroque monastery was transformed by the family into a princely palace in the styles of Rococo, Classicism, and Historicism. St. Emmeram's present appearance is the result of numerous expansions and restructurings, and practically every building style of European history survives here. The palace has over 500 rooms, even more than Buckingham Palace. Prince Albert II represents the 8th generation of the princely family to live in St. Emmeram. During the past few years, the princely house has begun to open its palaces to the general public. In winter, the palace courtyard is the scene of a romantic Christmas fair. Traditional craftsmen show their art here, goods that are truly unique. Tens of thousands of eager visitors come every year, and it is not at all rare to personally meet Her Highness, Princess Gloria von Thurn and Taxis. Not far from the Prince's Palace and the Abbey of St. Emmeram is Bismarckplatz, This marvelous square was laid out in 1805 under Karl Theodor von Dalberg. It is characterized by two classicistic buildings: the Municipal Theater, which even then was used for theatrical presentations and socializing, and the former palace of the French envoy. Today, it is the police headquarters for Lower Bavaria and the Upper Palatinate. Bismarckplatz is also where Gesandtenstraße begins, a street whose name comes from the fact that numerous Gesandten, or envoys to the Perpetual Imperial Diet, lived here. In Gesandtenstraße, one can also find the Protestant Trinity Church, built in early Baroque style. In the small cemetery behind the church, there are impressive gravestones. This is where numerous Protestant envoys found their final resting place. Heideplatz is one of the most popular squares in Regensburg. As early as the Middle Ages, it was used as a fairground and tournament place. Every building around Heideplatz has its own special history. There is, for example, the Thon-Dittmer Palace. It was created around 1809 by joining together several older Gothic buildings. This can still be seen in the private chapel, which is accessible from the courtyard. Then there is the Inn zum Goldenen Kreuz, the Golden Cross. This large building was formerly a patrician towered house, and the city's most famous hotel in the 16th century. It served as a lodging for emperors, kings, princes, and diplomats at the Diet. It was also here that the aged emperor, Charles V, came to know the lovely commoner Barbara Blomberg in 1546. She gave birth to Don Juan d'Austria, who, as it turned out, was to save the Western world in the naval battle of Lepanto. Ludwigstraße, named after Ludwig I of Bavaria, runs directly out of Heideplatz. In 1831, the king visited Regensburg in connection with laying the cornerstone of the Walhalla. This hall, a monument to heroic Germans of the past, sits majestically a few miles down the Danube near Donaustauf. The other end of Ludwigstraße is Arnulfsplatz, dedicated to Duke Arnulf of Bavaria. Parallel to the Danube runs Keplerstraße. It is named after the imperial court mathematician Johannes Kepler. The astronomer lived in house number 2 from 1626 to 1628 and died in house number 5 in 1630. Today, the Kepler Museum is located here. Right next door is the Runtinger House. It was built in the 12th century and was expanded around 1400. The Runtinger House was the seat of one of the most significant merchant families in Regensburg during the Middle Ages. Only a few minutes by foot from here is the best-known landmark in Regensburg, the Steinerne Brücke, or Stone Bridge. It was built from 1135 to 1146 and is a true masterpiece of Romanesque architecture. With its 330-meter, or 1,083-foot length, and its 15 arches, the stone bridge was the only crossing over the Danube made of stone between Ulm and Vienna. On the highest point of the stone bridge sits the Bruckmandel, the little man of the bridge. According to legend, this little man represents the master builder of the bridge, who made a bet with the master builder of the cathedral to see who could finish his project first. When he had trouble completing the bridge, he asked the devil for help. In return, the devil demanded the first 3 souls to cross the bridge. Well, the bridge was finished first, and when the duke, the bishop, and the wealthy citizens of the city showed up to marvel at this extraordinary piece of architecture, that put the master builder on the spot. But then he had a moment of inspiration. He drove a dog, a rooster, and a hen over the bridge. When the devil realized he had been cheated of his wages, he tried in his rage to tear the bridge down by raising the middle arch with his back. He wasn't able to destroy it completely, but ever since then, the bridge has had a slight hump.